Welcome back. This is the press club. Before the break, we were talking about, well, what you interpreted to be media self-regulation. I see it as an improvement of standards and agreeing, on a playing field for us to operate from.
Sorry, no, I missed the point. You mean the standards the aspect of discussing? I strayed into another orbit. I was in another time zone. No, I think that is absolutely necessary. We've been talking about that, the need for us to start to do. And my hats off to the Media Association members who have been discussing that because it is something we've been advocating here for quite some time, the need for, in the absence of media owners taking the initiative, as used to be long ago, to provide professional training. If we can do it on ourselves, among ourselves, and it is that much easier by virtue of the ease of communication now. Before, it was mail letters and long-distance telephone calls. Today we have Skype, we have internet, we have all of that. And the other positive thing I think came out of that World Press Freedom Day gathering, despite our absence, was what I noticed is how you call it, this long thread where everybody is contributing to the discussion on a telephone. It's a WhatsApp
group.
Yeah, a WhatsApp group. Okay, and I mean, I follow it. There's some very interesting ideas there. Sometimes when I'm in the smallest room in the house looking at it, I wonder, I laugh when I try to invent terms. Like the last one I came up with was, that some guys are engaging in journalistic intellectual masturbation, but it didn't really fit what I wanted to say. I think that there are some very good ideas coming up in that thread, is it called? Yeah, in that thread. And I think the more people contribute to it, I'll decide when I do that, folks. But I think if it grows, we're going to see more. I mean, there's one guy says, there was an interesting exchange where one guy was being accused of blowing his trumpet, and he said, well, why not blow your trumpet and hope people hear? Rather than people telling for people to, he's not going to be guided by what people think about the sound of his trumpet. He's going to tell them it is the best they heard, and he's going to strive to maintain and achieve that. So, interesting ideas are coming up.
That story will be told. That story will be told.
Yes, and Rick says he hopes he's alive.
Well, I have my own views on that particular exchange, but like you, I'll continue to observe and read. And,
there's a lot of interesting
I choose to come.
A lot of interesting stuff.
Speaking of interesting stuff, there's a CARICOM Foreign Affairs Ministers meeting that's been
coming up on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday of next week.
To look at transnational security and migration issues. That's a 3-day meeting here next week. Picture of our Foreign Affairs, External Affairs Minister Alva Baptiste, who made a very interesting contribution at the debate. But let's talk about that CARICOM meeting, transnational security and migration issues, especially in light of what we've been talking about and what's happening with the Lamberts.
I think that all that long theme there, it amounts to 2 words: human trafficking.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah, within the last year, within the last 5 months, we've seen Nepalese groups appear in Guyana, different groups of Nepalese, which have all been detained, arrested, processed in and out of court in cases treated officially by the Guyana government as cases of human trafficking. Then we have the St. Lucia case, and whereas our case was isolated 2 weeks ago, you will recall it became it gave the presence of human trafficking in the Caribbean a wider. It spread the tentacles more, to use a word, a phrase we used earlier, from the standpoint that when the 7 Nepalese left here illegally by boat from Grozile or wherever and went to St. Vincent,
Grenada.
On the way to Grenada, because they violated St. Vincent's territorial waters, and they traveled through St. Vincent's territorial waters without the boat itself declaring. Every boat passing through there has to, so there are rules of the road on the sea. So it was an illegal trip with illegal passengers, none of whom had a passport. They landed in Grenada, where they were arrested in the presence of a Ghanaian national resident in Trinidad who was suspected to have been in Grenada to pick them up, to take them to Trinidad. Now, just that one boat trip from Grosile, St. Lucia,
to St. George's.
To St. George's, Grenada, has brought in St. Vincent. It brought in Grenada, where they were arrested, and it brought in Trinidad, where the Ghanaian national is resident. Okay? So Trinidad, Guyana, St. Lucia, St. Vincent, Grenada. 5 countries in 5 months. And when we look at the way in which the human trafficking is playing out in Europe and other parts of the world, where less fortunate victims, including refugees, are being packed into, rickety boats and just parked on the ocean with the certainty that they will be saved by the European countries. That is a new thing. Each of those people will have paid money. And when it comes to the Caribbean, where not even the press, unfortunately, is sufficiently up to date on the implications of human trafficking and illegal migration, where, as we can see right here in St. Lucia, we have become the best, not just good Samaritans, but the best Samaritans in the world. The Nepalese landed here, they got stranded, church took them in, hotel took them in, guest house took them in,
DBS
took them in, commercial houses helped them, the police processing their case. And the interesting aspect of it, 2 interesting aspects, will lead into this CARICOM meeting. 1, look at the treatment that they are getting. In the case of the 7 who left St. Lucia, they have not been charged for breaking the law. Any St. Lucian who does that, going to Martinique, St. Vincent or Grenada, and who is caught, will certainly be processed in court. They were processed in court in Grenada, but they were not prosecuted. They were returned to St. Lucia, and the police are telling us they will not be prosecuted.
Because they continue to be treated as victims.
Yeah, they're treated as victims. But what message does that send? Because the way in which the human trafficking business operates, we must not only look at the victims. The most important thing is to keep our eyes on the perpetrators. And as the Lamberts thing shows, we're not dealing with the Africans who were capturing Africans for white people to sell into slavery. We're talking about sophisticated persons, doctors and lawyers and money people who have access to the technology, the money, the means, in one stroke of a pen. In the case of Lambert's, $750,000 shifted bank from here to the US, from one Lambert's academy to another. And if it is to be believed what is being alleged, then, and if it is found that it is part of a human trafficking ring, then it shows, and it will show, the sophistication of the human trafficking. So that if word gets, look at what has happened in Nepal. They had one earthquake. It affected 2 million people in one area in Kathmandu alone. And then 2 weeks later, there was another one. A number of the students here were affected, not many, but all tell you as a result of that earthquake, there's no way they would even want to think of returning home. Some are even talking about doing suicide if, push comes to shove and they are going to be sent back home. Now, we have to understand all of these things, folks, so that today each and every one of those students is in touch with their family, their relatives, and their friends by internet, the various internet messaging, instant messaging mechanisms. And we must never say never. What we see happening in Europe and Australia with those boatloads, and now it's gone to Asia with the Rohingyas. There's 8,000 of them on boats and no country allowing them to land. 10 days, no water, no food. No country allowing them to land. They're there, they could see the land. But so ask yourselves, why would any government not want to save 8,000 people but would seem to prefer to let them starve, even sending food for them but not letting them come out? It is because those countries, unlike us, have had to deal with the effects of human trafficking over such a long period of time that they know from the time the people get one green pasture and they inform the others that St. Lucia is a land of good Samaritans. Once you land there, you will be 1 inch closer to America. Once you land there, you're closer to America, which is the land of God that they're heading for. You know, once you see, God forbid, that message gets to Nepal, India, Pakistan, Philippines, and those places where people are running away from, do not be surprised, folks. You see in shiploads of persons by the thousands around St. Lucia dropping anchor, and eventually us being called to see what we could do to take care of them. Hope that never happens.
I think that's a very extreme view that I don't agree with. But the fact is that this CARICOM meeting, 3 days next week, is going to look at how CARICOM, and you mentioned the fact that 3 countries very quickly became involved in one single case, very, very quickly. How do we consolidate our approaches and the ways we handle these things? One of the issues I know people have had with CARICOM over several years of its existence, that we haven't necessarily gelled together enough in dealing with a lot of issues that affect us across the region. And this case obviously highlights the need for us to do that, and I think that will be addressed at this meeting. How does CARICOM have a standard procedure that we adopt?
I think, just like you mentioned about the need for journalists every now and then to decide how best we could unify our approaches to certain common things. In this case, I think what normally happens at meetings like that is that the countries that have already been affected would share their experiences and their concerns and offer warnings to other countries yet to be affected that this is how it happens.
It also points out in the story that it looks at the ministers will also seek to identify areas of the world where CARICOM can possibly share joint diplomatic representation, an issue that has been raised several times over the years. It even came about a budget recently. You know, how do we manage our embassies and diplomatic
well, the OECS is leading the way on that. For maybe a decade, more than a decade, the OECS has been sharing the building where they have, instead of each having a different high commission, you know, they did that. They share diplomatic relations in Europe and in Canada. To what extent that joint diplomatic relations is fully joint is conditioned by the usual issue of every nation wanting to exercise its sovereignty. So the joint diplomatic relations in the case of Canada, for example, is that you'd have a rotation of the chairmanship of the OECS representatives in Canada. And in areas where foreign affairs, like on those issues where CARICOM will have agreed after that meeting on an approach to migration issues, the OECS groupings in those areas of the world, Europe, Canada, and others, would be able to find those places where they could work together. But one area I could tell you they're not going to work together is in tourism. Because, you know, every country is competing with the other against the other for tourism.
Yeah, surprise, surprise, we due for another break. Let's take the break. When we come back, there are a couple other stories I want to touch on, including, well, a big story for me. St. Mary's College marking its 125th.
You buy your tie already for $50? Yes, I am a Samaritan. I'm looking for my tie.
Yes. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit more about that and some of the other stories making the news. We'll be right back.